but he did his session at the same time as Hideo Kojima got his Lifetime Achievement Award. So he only had 12 people turn up. So I'm glad to say I've beaten his record so far. So I'll introduce myself. So I've been in the industry for 20 years as of a couple of days ago. I'm a self-taught programmer from age 11 on an Amstrad CPC 464. And I basically worked for 3 companies across 6 games over 7 years before setting up Double 11 in 2009. So who is Double 11? So we're a developer and publisher of video games. We have 350 staff as of the end of August, and we are headquartered in Middlesbrough and also have a branch office in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, currently with around 55 employees. We've worked with many people over the years, from some of the smallest indies up to some of the biggest names in the industry. So a few caveats before we start. Obviously, most talks at Develop are supposed to be a generic kind of like teaching you something. This is a story. It's our story. So I'm going to try and generalize as much as I can, get as much out of it for you guys, but ultimately it is a story. This is a pre-lunch session as well. So there's 45 minutes after this, and it's likely that this talk here will go to the wire, but I'm prepared. You know, I think there's maybe value in any number of questions you might want to ask me at the end of this. And I'm prepared to stay here up until we get kicked out of the room, basically. And if anyone really wants to ask a load of questions after that, we can find somewhere to go if there's a group of people who still want to ask more. So I'm pretty much putting myself out there for questions for at least a couple of hours after this, should anyone want to talk. So a bit of general info. Obviously, we're 13 years in the making. We are 100% internally owned, and we've never took any loans or investments. So some periods have been trickier for us because of that. All of our shareholders still work for us, and the company was started with, I think, 9 years worth of savings from me, 100k director's loan, and lengthy periods of sweat equity from myself and Matt Shepcar. So our journey so far is going to kind of be described as like a piece of software, and this is how it's described. So you'll have minor and major revision changes. So we'll go all the way from 1.0, 2.0, 2.1, 3, and then we'll discuss what a potential 4.0 may look like for us. So, you know, we always want, I guess, and or have always strived to create an amazing place to work as much as we can within our financial limitations. You know, we've got amazing teams, and I'm very proud of what we've achieved for this date. But one of our proudest achievements is winning the Games Industry Best Place to Work Award, which we've won in all 3 size categories now. You know, winning these awards is, you know, it's nice because it shows you your staff love what they do and you're doing something right. And if you don't get one, which I found out that we haven't this year, it also gives you great feedback to find out what you could be doing better. So, you know, we covered that more than probably any other award. So version 1.0 was basically us going up to about 35 employees solely through work for hire and some long-term contracts. So it all started with non-games apps work that I took on basically as a contractor under Double 11 Limited, the company. And later I was joined by Matt Shepcar from Rockstar Leeds, which is where I came from as well, to help me with some of those apps. So we announced our new studio with joystick.com, no longer in existence, and headed out to our first GDC, not really truly knowing what we were doing. But off the back of that article and the fact that we were both Rockstar Grand Theft Auto lead programmers, we were able to get a few meetings, and we came back with some small contracts that were kind of in the value of about £15,000 to £30,000. And that allowed us to grow to about 3 or 4 people at that stage. Whilst we were doing that, we were approached by who were then called SCE at Sony Liverpool, basically to do some PlayStation Portable to Xperia Play conversions. And we finished 2 conversions to them there, and we jumped massively in budget there, up to 180 to 330,000 in budget. And that took us up to about 8 people. Both Xperia Play games never saw the light of day. They were both finished, but Sony decided that they were no longer going to support native C++ games and only C#. So those 2 were canned by default, which was quite worrying for us because at the time, like, we still had nothing to show really, and we didn't know where we were going for there. But I guess luckily Sony had lined up something for us that was much bigger. I want this moved to the next slide. So in late 2010, after these games were cancelled, Sony asked us if we were confident in downporting the Little Big Planet 2 engine from PS3 to Vita. and to get it running at 30 frames a second with 25% of the power of the PS3. And, this would be our biggest challenge so far. We didn't truly know whether it was possible or not, but we knew we would give it our all, and that in theory, anything's possible. And we looked at the outcome of this, that it would treble our size, it would give us an international reputation. So we went ahead with it. And in roughly January 2010, we presented Sony a version of level Gripple Grapple from LBP2 running on the Vita with no textures at 5 frames a second. They asked, could we finish it? And we said yes. So alongside that LBP Vita contract as well, which helped us grow more moving forward, is the fact that they also offered us a Sony exclusivity arrangement where they would cover most of the studio and cover all of our costs every month and a bit more, regardless of what contract we had on top of that with them. And this is the biggest thing we've been offered so far. It would take a lot of risk off, and we took it. So Little Big Planet PS Vita launched in September 2012 to a 9 out of 10 review from IGN, quoted the best Little Big Planet game to date. So basically, this is our version 1.0. It lasted 36 months. Each new contract was at least double the value of the last one, which really, really helped take a lot of the risk off. And the exclusivity safety net helped even more. We averaged, not that you can have part people, but we averaged 1.1 employees added to the company every month in this period. And certainly, the company started to require more. We were purely development. There wasn't anyone that we had that had done business before, but we did notice that once we got to 20 employees, we did need more administration, HR, and such. So, during version 1.0, my main focus was as a developer, because that was my history, and on completing Little Big Planet Vita to the highest level possible to cement our national reputation. But when we broke 25 people in 2011, it was obvious that the non-development side of our business, the operations, needed to be a focus as well to treat our people as best we can. So we hired our current COO, Mark South, to work in this area. And he was the first person who had an experience of running a business before and also had an MBA. So I guess, kind of takeaways from version 1, is that, growth in year 1 is all about survival, and so for your best chance of surviving, if you're going to start out on this, get your financial house in order first, clear any debt, reduce your living costs to the bare minimum, and, get ready to live on that minimum for a potential indefinite period of time, whilst also getting comfortable with the risk of losing everything, which we nearly did at one point in the early days. Also, kind of get the right people in the room. You need a good lawyer. Your contract needs to be as flexible as possible and offer you as much protection as possible in case of any change of circumstance. Also look to getting advisors, anyone that is going to help you, not make the mistakes that you're going to make because they've already made them at some point in the past. As much as possible, try and use contractors to give you a bit of flexibility in your size, keeping your costs low. At the end of the project, we couldn't do that, unfortunately. What we were doing was so specialist. And also vet your clients very thoroughly. Make sure that they don't have a history of not making payments to people, basically. Talk to people who've worked for them and get as much advice as possible, because in 2010, we nearly got took out by someone who was withholding 3 milestone payments. It was rather large corporate at the time, and they were withholding them purely because they were going to miss their end of financial year targets. So they just had a blanket thing out to say, don't pay anyone for 3 months. So that nearly took us out. I, at one point, threatened to delete everything that they had on our source control server and caused them some trouble, and we did get paid earlier than everyone else. But, please vet your clients first, because you don't want someone with a history of not paying. Arrange your payment terms, as short as possible. 30-day payments are great. 60 and 90 days will cause you problems early on with your cash flow. So please try and avoid them as much as you can. And I guess finally, build what's to come, not just for the project at hand. Consider how specialist the thing that you're building is against what the market wants and what you might be doing next. What we built for LBP was super specialist, and it was only really geared up to go directly into making the sequel. But, obviously at that time, the Vita was going to be a massive success, so there was no worry with that. Straight on to number 2. So, we didn't realize it at the time, but like building that hyper specialist setup really did limit our growth for the next 2 years. So yeah, moving on. So version 2.0. So moving forward, the failure of the Vita, to hit the mass markets had drawn into question the feasibility of huge investments from first party at Sony into games, and this also put our use inside of Sony into question, as we weren't really a fully formed studio. We did a lot on that game, but a lot of the design and creative was done by Tarsier and Sumo and Supermassive. So we weren't really useful for anything other than tech support for other studios, and that was going to be a massive step down for us, basically, and nobody really wanted to take that work. So in 2013, Sony and Double 11 basically mutually agreed to end our exclusive partnership. So at the time, with about 6 months worth of cash in the bank and 6 months worth of paid security from Sony on our get out clause, we had basically 12 months to turn the ship around. So at this point, for the first time in 18 months, we had an uncomfortable level of risk in the business. Outside of financial risk, we were also entering into the virgin territory of licensing, publishing, and self-financing, which is how we basically got out of this. Throughout this period, we didn't really manage to secure any work for hire at all. We thought we would, like our 9 out of 10 on LVP got us to everyone's door, but our specialist nature didn't get us really through any at the time. So we started licensing and publishing other people's work and doing conversions, basically was the best use of our team. Lots of testers, lots of engineers, an artist, a designer, and production staff, basically, which is what we had. But luckily, this got us through the door with Sony London. A lot of thanks to Shahid Ahmad for us still being here today, for the fact that we were able to gain a bunch of advances for conversions of indie titles to Vita. We did 5 games for him, and although they weren't all really fully funded, we were then just only dependent on part of the royalties to put part of the costs back. And our contracts with him did get bigger and bigger over time as well. So we worked incredibly hard through version 2.0. Over 28 months, we launched 16 SKUs of product, averaging a SKU release of something every 7 weeks, basically just to stay alive, get the next royalty stream in, to get the next deal, to keep on moving forward. However, I guess it wasn't enough to avoid a restructure. In 2013, we had to make 11 people redundant due to basically our publishing operations not being able to sustain ourselves at the size that we left basically LVP Vita at. And, redundancies are always bad. They're horrible things. But, it's one of the hardest decisions I've had to make. And the moment I needed to do it, I woke up and I didn't know where my shoes were because I drank so much the night before, having to make the decision. But when it finally happened, it was done for the reason of the survival of the company. And, if there's ever any silver lining to redundancies, if it wasn't for that restructure, we wouldn't be employing 350 people today, because we just wouldn't be here. So if you look here, the next version 2.0, 28 months, we went down to 3 non-development staff from 4 that we had in version 1.10. We couldn't really get them back because we were so close to the bone on money. We didn't want to pay any more than we needed to. There's a third of a head lost every month, although obviously that's all really concentrated into that one big drop, as you can see. And although we were still treating people with respect and, making as best a company we could, there were no hierarchical improvements, or there was no extra benefits or anything in this time, because we literally just couldn't afford them. So this is what I'm going to call keeping a company. Some of the take backs from version 2. I told you that in version 1 we hired Mark to basically look at the operation side of the business, to put their full focus in there. But by version 2, at least 50% of his time was donning the publishing hat and marketing hat and setting up that department for us to get us through that difficult period. So, we did what we had with the resources at the time. Our ability to improve was reduced because Mark had 2 jobs now. And I'll just say that at this point, necessity is the mother of all invention. And it was this point where all directors and senior management started wearing multiple hats, basically, to just do whatever was needed to get to the next project. And And the reason for the megabus here is, money was so tight at this point. We were going down to London once a month, and Mark and I were taking the night bus from Middlesbrough and showering in London Victoria Station because we couldn't actually afford a train ticket. So, you will do whatever you need to when you feel like you've built, something good and you want to keep it. So a bit more takeaways here, try and avoid making yourself reliant on game sales for survival at all costs. It's not a nice place to be. If you're going to do self-funded work, try and balance your self-funded work with profitable work for hire, so that your theoretical returns on your self-funded work, could be zero, because they will always be speculative. And ideally only invest in your own titles at the same or less level than you are profitable, because at that point the game can fall flat on its face. No one's jobs are at risk, and you just move forward, you learn some lessons, and you move on. So I guess since 2015, we've had this like never bet the farm mentality. We employ a method of not banking on royalties or sales for anything. So in financial projections for us, royalties always and sales always come out with zero for any planning, and we deal with them when they come in. But I guess the last thing you need to know is that, just getting to the end of the year and becoming a better studio, stronger studio is still winning. Survival is winning in the games industry, and profit doesn't matter if you've actually built something that's better, because it improves your chances of being even better the next year. Right, so on to version 2.1, actually, no, wrong slide. Just beware also, there's a mental limit to how long you can stay in survival mode, and it will start to affect your mental health the longer you stay in there. And also, once you get into that survival mode, it's very difficult to get out of it. Even a moderate success and putting a little bit more money in the bank and getting a little bit more headroom, you'll still really be reluctant to change anything, because you don't know when you're just going to go back and need that. And I guess finally, if you should have a change of circumstances like we did coming out of the exclusivity arrangement, if you're going to need to restructure what you have, you need to look to do it as soon as possible. We were 8 months late probably into making that decision, and it did almost cost everyone's job. So, no matter how hard it is to think about something like that, if it's going to be an inevitability, you have to think about it as soon as possible. So on to 2.1, million selling games and the return of work for hire. So obviously after that, in 2.0, our financial success was limited, but we had built a long, reputation for doing difficult conversions, especially downporting to platforms with less power. Our reputation was so that we basically were able to sign Goat Simulator for console. And that launched in 2015 in April for Xbox One and Xbox 360. And it was our first ever million plus selling self-published title. So what did it do? So what did it do for us? We were now operating with 10 to 12 months worth of security in the bank. So we finally got out of that scary zone. I guess it allowed us to act proactively for the first time in 2.5 years instead of being completely reactive. And it was the first time we could get back to trying to truly make the company a great place to work and add more benefits and give more to the staff. So, the first thing that we did, on the last slide, is we signed Prison Architect, another IP that had done a hell of a lot on PC, and we were looking to bring that, so a lot lower risk than the kind of stuff we were publishing earlier on. But 2016 also saw the return of work for hire. We did the Lego Harry Potter collection for PS4. We gained that contract through a recommendation from Sony Europe to Warner and Travelers, who wanted to do a deal with them. So we ended up with that work, and that started a steady stream of work for hire from them for the next 2 years. I think a total of like 6 SKUs of product we did for Warner in that time. So, we're finally, not operating from hand to mouth now. We can start to grow, but I will say that our mindset was still stuck in survival mode, even though we did have more money in the bank. We hired the kind of bare minimum we needed at the point. We avoided specialists like animation and audio in-house because we still didn't know whether we'd need them from project to project. And although we were working on more titles now as well, we weren't really reviewing the suitability of our hierarchy, as everything was just about working. We weren't really considering changing it. And I guess this is the point where we started spreading our hierarchy thinner and thinner, but still working. So we didn't really look to do anything about it. So for version 2.1 growth, lasted 26 months, consistently operated with 10 months of company security in the bank, gained an average of 3/4 of an employee every month. And the non-development side of our business started to grow again, the support structure, because we had the money. Again, like I said, we didn't change the hierarchy, but at this point, we really should have been considering it. So I guess at this point, we went through a really difficult stage in 2.0. We know that our team have been releasing, which is hard, and we knew that they needed a break. But we also needed to keep as much money in the bank as possible because we were self-funding Prison Architect. So although we did pay bonuses, the pot that we had to pay out was quite limited. So we needed to look for, I guess, other ways to reward people, to keep them sane and to keep them happy. So at this point where we were still mainly in doing shorter projects, mainly in control of everything ourselves, for 3 years from 2015 to 2017, we offered people the option basically because everyone took a week of holiday in December, but one person at that time. We offered them the option to basically put a week of their holidays in December, and we would just shut the studio in December and give everyone 5 weeks off. Again, because we went through that mentality of release, we knew we needed a lengthy period of time where people could just relax. And I think it amounts to almost 6 weeks off at the end of the year, but we could do that because we were in control of our projects, and the other projects we were taking on, like the Harry Potter stuff, we could keep out of the way of Christmas. But unfortunately, around about 2018, that wasn't really possible anymore due to the bigger, longer commitments we had where we couldn't just take a rest. Although we have given extended Christmas breaks every year since that. I guess in 2017 also, we decided to stop using bonuses, and this time solely to compensate staff for extra effort. And we basically started a paid overtime system. Our paid overtime's always been voluntary. It's never been forced, and it scales on a rate basically from your pro rata hourly rate up to double, depending on how much you've done or what day it's on. So that was really important for us because one of the problems I've seen, in all of my time before that, is that you do overtime in lieu of bonuses, but when the bonuses don't come, then you get pissed off because you think the company owes you something and you should have got it, but you didn't. So, we want to make sure that everyone is being rewarded and well rewarded, in advance of whatever they get paid hourly for that work that they've done before the game even comes out. Then when the bonuses and anything else comes in, you're already at an even keel with the business and you don't feel like you're owed anything. So, we'll say, hey, you're only as good as your last release. So I guess, since 2009, we've always valued the quality of our products before profit to protect our reputation. And finally, this concentration on our reputation was starting to, yield a return on investment. We're being recommended to others now from numerous sources and previous clients. So I just want to say, don't ever sacrifice your reputation because you're probably more reliant on it than you think. It took us probably best part of 6-7 years to get to the point where people were coming to our door rather than us having to go asking for work elsewhere. Right, so moving on to version 2.2, still pretty much doing the same thing, but work for hire starts overtaking our publishing, and we get back to first party work again, the first time since we left Sony exclusivity in 2013. So we signed up to do Crackdown 3 for PC. This was our first Microsoft contract of trying to work with them, going in for RFPs maybe 3 or 4 times. And, this was going to be a great opportunity for us. And it wasn't going to increase the size of Double 11 per se, that the size of Double 11 was going to remain constant. But we knew if we delivered this game successfully, which was going to be hard, with a smile on our faces, then it was going to lead to something in the future. So we made a decision here to basically just spend whatever was needed, not worry about making any profit on this game, up all of our infrastructure from what we could call double A to treble A, and just make sure that we, blew Microsoft away with what we did. And, Crackdown 3, was always about the next project with Microsoft, and, we sacrificed at making anything here to get to our next level. In 2018, we signed Rust for Console. It was our biggest undertaking, probably one of the most difficult things we've done, and also the biggest commercial undertaking that we've ever done. Took far longer than we'd originally planned, 4 times the original budget. But we knew handling a persistent, 100 player versus player game would move us forward. But it did come at the cost of the growth of the studio, because so much of our profits were going into Rust. It really didn't allow us to do anything else. We're truly stretching the whole don't bet the farm, only invest your profits to its absolute limits. So this particular stage of the company lasted about 18 months. Growth was steady through some projects, but the large financial investment from Rust was pretty much crippling us from being able to do anything more outside of the contracts that we had. Our hierarchy basically was remaining the same here, but this is the point where we really started to think that we needed to start doing something differently, because we had more projects and we could see a bit longer into the future. So we will continue with December's off here. The last one was the first year of Crackdown. All overtime was paid. We've started bringing in our first wellbeing staff at around about 70. We added private healthcare, and I guess for the first time, the staff knew that the projects that were coming in that we were bidding on now were bigger and better, and we're starting to get more excited about the journey that we were going on. So I guess here, growth can come from many different places. It can come through lucrative contracts with hiring headroom, come through investment. It can be fueled by a runaway success with a title. But, I guess looking back, the point I want to make here is that pretty much all of our growth has come through sacrificing our profits and investing in our reputation in the future. So, we got access to GoatSim because a recommendation from previous work from previous client. Part of us being chosen to do Prison Architect was a recommendation from a previous client. Getting the work from Lego, Travelers, that moved us forward, came from a reputation with Sony London, where they said that we were probably the only people in England that could meet the dates that they wanted to do. So, in a lot of cases, it has been about reputation. And, to skip to the end with Microsoft, we're working on 4 separate Microsoft projects now at the moment, and that's all because we sacrificed absolutely everything we possibly could to make Crackdown 3, our part of Crackdown 3, flawless, which was the whole PC version. So just think, it is okay to have low profits if you're lowering them on purpose to build for the future. But I will caveat that with that's a lot easier said than done, because we don't have investors, so we don't have anyone telling us what we can't do and what levels of profit that we have to attain. So this is moving on now. This is a major revision change up to 3.0, which I'll call the reliable future. The first time we're starting to be able to do really, really long-term planning. So, this first major revision upgrade was the first since 2013, and the whole point of it was to remove that multi-hat wearing stuff from our entire hierarchy. So we said from now on, everyone needs to only wear one hat, and we need to hire people in to make sure that you only have one hat on, and you're only allowed to keep 2 hats on if you provide me a plan to take it off in the next 3 months. So we started reorganizing now to make us what we are today now at 350, and that we started that at between 65 and 70 people. And we did this because, early on in this, we'd signed Minecraft Dungeons, which I guess was our reward for our delivery on Crackdown 3. We started taking over Prison Architect in totality from Introversion, because we just did the console versions, but they sold the IP to Paradox, and Paradox chose us. And we also signed a three-year fully original title with Paradox at that time. So I guess here for the first time, we could see more than 2 years into the future for the entire studio. We knew what size we were going to be. And we knew that our hierarchy was basically screwed to move forward. So this is when we started putting in that plan. And the plan was basically to scale up to 150. I mean, that's what we knew. And then we were basically going to plan for the next 150 and the next 150. So it was basically a plan to get ahead of ourselves. The moment that we hit 150 people, actually at 75, we had to get the structure in place to handle 150. And the moment we hit 150, we all got back in a room again and said, what's our hierarchy look like at 300? Like, how many projects, how many people do you need? What support staff do you need? how much, management and departmental managers do we need to get, everyone looked after every month. So at 150, we started building for 300, and at 300, we've started building basically for 450. So, I guess most of this, I think some typos here, but most of this lasted about 29 months. We added an absolute, I think it says 100 staff members up to 3.1, but in total, we got all the way up to 350 in this period, and it's where we are now. We opened the Kuala Lumpur studio. It's where you can see that rather crudely fonted KL Open arrow at that point. And that studio we opened right at the beginning of the pandemic. So that was harder than it should have been. That studio was opened in February, and then pretty much everything was put on lockdown in March. But there's about 55 people there now. And I guess this stage as well, even though we had a lot more work and more lucrative contracts, the growth was still limited by Rust because we were still investing in Rust at that point. So at this point, from a people perspective, we added dedicated internal recruitment, dedicated learning and development manager, a program manager who was focusing on company tasks that were so big that they were projects in themselves, and it was also kind of acting as client relationship management. And we started adding multiple levels of production on a project instead of what was usually just me, one of them sitting there. I think the breaking point was I needed a producer to help me on Minecraft Dungeons because I was being the producer on that. We had 4 interviews, 3 good people, and someone asked me to go away and tell me who I wanted to hire for the job, and the answer was all of them. So that's really worked out. And again, we're just really trying to make sure that everyone had one laser focus to do and nothing else, so they could concentrate. So I guess the next stage of the journey is, what's going to be used for our future growth. We've gained new partners at this point. Come, not far off, we'll be 50 people working on Fallout 76 with Bethesda. We've had 3 new Microsoft projects. We announced most recently that we're doing the console adaptations of RimWorld, and Rust was released in May 2021. And that was the last kind of financial burden that was limiting our growth that was removed. Rust's done phenomenally well and is really helping us push forward after it limited us for pretty much 3 years. So we broke the 300 employee limit in 22, moving the company to the next stage. So I guess at this point, we now have 13 employees in our people and culture department. They're there to treat everyone as individuals, but also to treat everyone fairly. That dedicated people team is kind of there as being like the fingers on the pulse of people's well-being. We rolled out Plum, mental health and well-being platform to the employees, and started providing more leadership training and coaching because, there's a lot of people who move up into areas. We've got 2 tracks of management and principal track. And, we realized that although a lot of people were really good at their job, they also needed a hell of a lot of support transitioning onto the management side. We also opened an employee equality, diversity and inclusion group that supports our underrepresented and minority groups called EDEN, which is the Employee Diversity and Equality Network. So the next bit, this could be a talk by itself, but I want to just do one bit on retention. So we went through a point in time pre-pandemic where we didn't lose a single person in 4 years. And I say that at the moment we have 40% of the UK games industry average staff turnover rate. So I think it's a really important thing to concentrate on. You should concentrate on this because growth is severely hampered if you have high staff turnover. I mean, if you've got a 10% staff turnover with 500 people, you've got to hire 50 people just to stay where you were. And I think I always look at this like any sports team. The longer they play together, the better they play, and the higher the chance of winning. So if somebody does leave, you really need to put a lot of effort into finding out why and seeing if there's anything you can do better. Maybe there wasn't, a lot of family circumstances and stuff like that, but you need to always be making sure that, you're retaining staff for as long as possible. So, I guess this is the way that I look at it, right? I say that if they don't believe, they will leave. So, everyone, you need to put a lot of focus into this. People need to believe in your company's vision and your ability to achieve it. It can't just be bullshit. Sorry if that's swearing on the stream. 10 minutes, right? Okay. That people need to believe that they can grow to their full potential inside of the studio. They need to know that they're going to be supported to do that, and so they do need to believe that they're being supported along the way, and they do need to believe that they know exactly what's going on inside the company. I mean, we've started doing quarterly staff updates where we tell them everything we possibly can so everyone knows what's going on, because if you don't, people just make up what they think is the case in their own head, and 50% of the time it'll be wrong. So it's always best to keep people well informed as to what you're doing, and you need to believe that what your management says is truthful. With all news, good or bad, it must be delivered honestly. You get one chance with your reputation, like once a liar, always a liar. And if you are dishonest in any way, you're probably going to pay the price for that for years to come. We've lost 2 projects in the past 3 years to situations of completely outside of our control. And within 24 hours, it was completely communicated through all levels of the hierarchy and to the team and the company. So we would have a massive discourse about what had happened, let everyone ask any questions, and then we'd go and fight for the team to try and get them projects back. And in both cases, we've got the projects back. One was done for legal bullshit reasons, and the other one was done because somebody just made a bad decision high up in a corporate. But we put ourselves in front of the staff and said, we're going to fight to get these back. We could have won, we could have lost, but what's important is that you're completely honest about what's going on, and you're happy to, for the staff to see it. If it was to fail, we would have went back in front of the company and explained exactly why, and if it was our error, what we were going to do to make sure it didn't happen. But, I think in these cases, we wanted to know people we were going to fight, and we wanted to tell them exactly what was going on. So, 011 version 4, what could the future be like? So, what's further down the road? I don't know. Is there something that could happen to change our 3.x mentality of just constantly reviewing the hierarchy? Well, it's hard to tell now. And now, I'm going to put 011 aside for the moment and just really kind of generalize and discuss what the options would be for a company of our size doing what we do from this point, doing roughly like 25% publishing, 75% work for hire. Oh, obviously you could go down the route of I can't even read this, I've got no notes, of listing on AIM. Our EBITDA is more than high enough to list on AIM if we wanted to. It would bring costs of about $1 million in corporate governance. It would probably require a restructure to deal with all of the governance of being a public company. But, at that point, you would be answerable to the City of London and not necessarily able to operate the company like you want to run it, because profit is key in this case. And it's a lot harder to say, well, we're just not going to make any money next year because we're going to make treble the year after that. No one in London wants to hear that. The next thing, we could be acquired. We're not currently for sale, but you could be acquired. And this could affect your structure depending who it is that buys you. You could be bought by someone like Embracer, and then they'll be like, hey, we just keep you as a separate business unit. You keep on doing exactly what you're doing, jog on, get your earn out, and nothing would really change. It would be completely up to you. But you could be, we could be brought into basically as a massive guns for hire to take over are part of another large corporation. At that point, your 4.0 is pretty much going to be worked out for you. I'm trying to think of a good example. Let's just say that, no, I can't think of a good one. But yeah, you just get absorbed into one big franchise. Let's just say that we were going to do a spin-off to Skyrim, and they were like, well, this is what you do now, and it's everyone. At that point, that's not the structure of your company. You're going to have to change it to meet them needs. So I guess the last one is just keep on going. It's likely that outside of a reasonable success with an original game for us, that we're probably going to just keep on iterating, keep on addressing our support hierarchy and looking at what we do for the next 150 people, working on a kind of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality. So I guess to the end here, in summary, we've pretty much grown, every year apart from that one period. We're trying to create an amazing place to work, and all slow years of growth have pretty much been down to high risk bets on like self-funded projects. It's always been what's stopped us. But like outside of a phenomenal success on original IP, which we are developing at the moment, I don't really fundamentally see us changing how the business works in the short term. Because if we had a big success with something ourselves, we would have to reevaluate where our staff was going. And it would be more of a case of, well, actually, when this project for company X comes to an end, actually it's better for all them people to be over here. And you would start building more hierarchy around that rather than across multiple projects. So, again, we'll continue trying to concentrate on being a blessed place to work. And as I said before, if we don't win it like we haven't this year, we'll look as to why, and we'll try and fix that to give us a better chance of doing it the next year. Always concentrating on a best place to work it should always be your best priority. Highly engaged, super happy people will do better work and they will create amazing things. So all in all, that's everything. I've managed to cram 13 years into just over 40 minutes. Like I said, I'm open to questions about anything in general. So don't be shy. And like I said, I'm here till whenever. So does anyone have... Does anyone have any questions? Is anyone, like, am I just pointing to who I'm taking the questions from? Nobody's right. Okay. At the front. Is there a mic?
That was a great talk.
Thank you.
If any, what was your greatest avoidable mistake, do you think?
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
If any, what was your greatest avoidable mistake?
The one that we should have avoided the most was building something super ridiculously specialist for LBP. We were just so much concentrating on getting that game finished to the best quality. We weren't even really thinking what was going to happen next, and no one that was advising us even brought it up either. And like I said, I don't know, like, I'm not regretting of that. It did cause 2 years of pain, but if we hadn't have went through that pain, we wouldn't be where we are now. I know a lot of people don't like crunch. We don't do crunch, but I wouldn't be where I am today without 3 years of crunch in my first job. So I don't regret any. I don't regret any of making that mistake. But yeah, I think that if we'd have avoided that mistake, we ultimately probably would have went down a different path to what we've had now. And it's difficult to say what that would have been, but it would have been different.
Inspirational talk. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks. It's a great talk.
Thank you.
Talking about like multiple hats, as you did, we're definitely in that situation at the moment. How did you look after each other in like the management team to make sure that well-being was like being maintained as well?
Most of the stress in that point was on the directors. It was mainly on myself, Mark South, and Kimberly Turner, and we were always around the same table. The other two directors, Rob and Matt, were taking basically the heat on the teams, being just like the go-to tech guys for all of the hardest problems. But I think from a business and organizational perspective, we just all had each other's backs all the time. So if we had, if someone was juggling too many things, the moment we got a spare second, we'd be on to help them. I mean, it wasn't really sustainable, but we went through that for as long as we could. But it wasn't until we could see far enough into the future that we just decided to start hiring and taking those hats off. But yeah, we just had each other's backs as much as we possibly could and shared the work. I think during that period, everyone was doing business development, and today it's like, depending on who it is, different things still come into me, Mark, or Kim, because if someone was too busy with something else, we would take that on.
You have very impressive staff retention, and I was just wondering what you said, that you would make sure you understand why people leave and you address it. So I was wondering if you have any advice about how you can get that information out of people.
All right,
and
okay.
How would you address it?
So it really depends. It depends on the staff member. Some people honest and upfront enough to come and have a conversation and saying they're considering leaving before that happens, which is always the best way, because then you can actually sit and talk to them. You know, we've had one person that we spent a lot of time with. We understood why he was leaving. We did as much as we possibly could to fix that. It still wasn't enough. He left, but then he came back after a month. But we do exit interviews with everyone. We make sure that everyone goes through an exit interview before they leave, and we put aside as much, like a full day for that, if we need to see if there's anything that we could have done better.
Cool. Thank you.
Sorry.
Thanks, Lee. Great talk. I work for Sega Europe, running the people and talent function. I'm interested in, I guess, culture at scale, and obviously you've seen a lot of scaling over a short period of time. Have you got any, I guess, observations on cultural changes and how perhaps you've handled that transition?
I knew I recognised you from your LinkedIn profile, first of all. So yeah, Sega, right? Okay. There hasn't really been many massive cultural changes for us. I guess there probably would have been if we hadn't have started planning well ahead. I can see that if we hadn't have done that, then people would have felt like everything was getting much bigger, and the support that each individual was getting was going down. So I can certainly see that there would have been a big problem if we hadn't have changed like that. Outside of that, I think really it's just about making sure you always give time to culture issues. Like if any, we've had things that have happened at the company where, maybe less than 1 in 100 staff in a year, or like there'll be an issue or something, but we deal with them with the utmost importance. Like all of the company directors are on it, because I guess it's just like your reputation. You start damaging your culture, it's bad, and it can take a long time to reverse. So I guess we see the seriousness of maintaining our culture. We put a lot of work and effort into it. And if anything comes that looks like it's going to break it, then we jump in to fix it, and we put as much time into it as we can. The last thing we want is people getting disgruntled at not being dealt with, and then people walk out on the lunch hour just to have a 30-minute bitch fest. I guess it's just putting the time in. So far it's working. But I am a bit concerned at the moment now that we probably need to overstaff our people and culture function even more than is currently planned.
Great, thanks.
There's two next to each other there, I think. Okay. Well, am I getting? I know it's not streamed anymore, but I'm not getting booted out of here. Or is it you just want to go and get your lunch?
Thank you very much. Yeah, that was a great talk. Thank you. I'm Lauren. I'm from Tag Games, and yeah, we're going through quite a bit of scaling just now. My kind of question was, how do you facilitate team feedback, making sure that people who are doing the work get to provide creative feedback on projects, and stop them being siloed as well. So cross-discipline feedback, because previously we were 12-person teams. Now we're this big massive team that's trying to do a big massive project. So I guess, how do you facilitate that kind of stuff?
We do cross-team feedback meetings. And I guess I don't really know the answer to that question, because I'm not, Stephen can probably answer that better than I can, who I believe you may have worked with in the past. But yeah, we try, I guess we're open with everything. There's no, I came from when I started in the industry, I could get into one door and every other door was shut to me. And each team had their own engine, their own culture, their own everything. I guess we're quite open with everything. And we do have multiple channels on Teams where everyone knows they can just go and ask a development question or just put something out there. If they need help, I think it's under development general or something. They just put a request out. Hey, has anyone ever dealt with this before? I'm interested to hear what you think. Then someone will reply, yeah, hit me up on a DM and then we'll talk about it. So I guess we don't stop anyone from talking to each other and trying to learn. But I know the production teams share information and knowledge. And then they basically, through that, put people, the producers will say the problem that they have, maybe in this discipline with this particular person that he needs to work out a solution for. And then the producers work together to find the the best person, basically, who's got the most knowledge of that in the company. Is that it? Right, is there anyone else, actually, is there anyone else wants to ask me anything? I'm just going to stay here. Can we leave the mics on? This mic, at least, and people at the front, and anyone's free to leave. If anyone's got anything else to ask, I'll just point at people. You won't have a mic, so you'll have to shout.
That was a hell of a journey that you've been on. How are you feeling after all of it?
Tired. I'll say that, like, for the first time in 13 years, I can actually take a break now. Like, I would have been able to take a break 2 weeks ago if it wasn't for writing this talk. But yeah, I guess I'm at a point now where, like, I can choose where I want to be and choose where I want to focus. And I do have a lot of mental health issues that need to be reversed through going through hell for long periods of time. Going through 5-month legal battles and stuff like that. So, the company is at the point now where there's enough people throughout the hierarchy that I'm going to get a personal trainer and a life coach and whatnot, and actually do myself as a project for the first time in 13 years. It's hard to say. You do whatever you can to keep on going, and it doesn't matter because you're responsible for everyone's jobs. But you do need to get to a point as soon as possible. And you always do need to be putting a plan in place where you will get that breathing space and that headroom, because ultimately, if you go through a decade-long journey to do this, you're going to want to end up in a position where you don't start work till like 2 p.m. in the afternoon till 6 p.m. and you spend the whole morning going for a walk, clearing your head, doing some exercise, having a swim, treating yourself well, preparing nice food that's healthy because you've got the time. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? Oh, we might as well go next door.
What format do you find works well for your quarterly or startup days?
At the moment, we go through, like, each one of the producers for the team will go through each project bit by bit, and then the directors and the people team will come on and basically show their goals for the next quarter and what we're trying to achieve. And then following that, it's just a bit of an AMA, ask me anything you want. And all of the directors basically open themselves up to basically any question that any staff member wants to ask. And we always say that we'll answer as honestly as we can. That's not that we're lying, but like in certain cases, like there was one point for 3 months, I couldn't tell someone what the project was we were working on with one of our clients because it had to be kept completely under wraps. But yeah, that's it basically.